Summer, and more importantly, happy Pride. Buckle up because we have an exciting panel for you today, hosted by myself, Jordan Usden, the SVP of Client Development at Ben. I'm so proud to present Why We Pride, a panel celebrating intersecting LGBTQIA plus identities in the entertainment industry. In today's panel, we'll be discussing the importance of inclusivity, diversity, and representation across popular entertainment. And with that, I would love nothing more to introduce you to the individuals who are continuing to make an impact to represent the community across the entertainment industry. So, with that, I'm going to kick it over to our lovely panelists to introduce themselves. Kicking it over to Matthew.
Oh, hi there. Okay. Hi, everyone. I'm Matthew Conrado. I currently work at PepsiCo on our bubbly sparkling water brand, working on strategy and innovation. I'm known for my queer marketing campaigns with bubbly sparkling water. I've been recognized on Adweek as a Pride Star of 2021. I've worked at a variety of different industries from TV, I worked at CBS, I worked in fashion, Michael Kors, Calvin Klein, John Barbados, and I worked on the agency side. So variety of different industries, but currently at PepsiCo.
Amazing.
Hi
Thank you for
everyone,
having
my
me.
name is Smoogie. I am a VTuber slash Twitch streamer, and I've been doing this full time actually very recently. But I stream a bunch of games on Twitch, and I have a lovely community who are actually some of which in the audience right now. Hi guys, welcome in, welcome in. Hope you guys are doing well. Thank you for coming. I'm so happy to be here. I'm excited to talk today.
Awesome. So great to have you. And last but not least, Andrew.
Amazing. Thanks so much, Jordan, for having us. I think this is, I love the fact that it's called Why We Pride. I think that's super exciting. My name is Andrew Almendris. I am currently the VP of Global Creative Marketing at IMAX. I've been working there for 6 years, building their in-house creative team. Prior to that, like Matt, I was on the agency side as well. So very excited to be here and to be with my peers.
Awesome. Well, thank you all for joining. We're so excited to get this started. I would love to first kick it off. I know we're going to hear from you all throughout this panel, but first and foremost, I would just love to kick it off with why we're all here to celebrate Pride. So for me, I celebrate Pride because the people before me, or there have been people before me that couldn't. Also, it allows me to live authentically so I can be my best self. And that's truly why I celebrate year after year, not just for 1 month, but all of the time. So, want to kind of kick that question back to you all as well. What does Pride mean to you, and why do you celebrate?
As for me, I am someone who has, I feel like, gone to the party a little bit late, I would say, with like my background being brought up in like a very conservative home and being brought up in a very conservative family. But I think the reason why I celebrate Pride is because I have been experienced through that. And I've been in a situation where I haven't been able to express myself and I haven't been able to really truly explore who I want to be. And I want to celebrate both the opportunity for other people to do that, but also open up more exposure for people to recognize that they can do that.
Yeah, and I'll go next. So for me, Pride is the opportunity to be absolutely unapologetic. I think for so much of us as queer people, we hide the true, like you said, the authentic selves that we've been for our entire lives. And, Pride is our opportunity to be with our chosen family and be our utmost fun and loud and authentic selves.
I think for me, one of my close friends, she told me that she said, like you are the lens in which we see your community. And as soon as she told me that, I was like, oh my gosh, like I am representing an entire, community. And I think for me, it's a very self-reflective process. I also think, to Matt's point, it's you internalize or we know who we are on the inside. And it's really like a period of time where you can actually externalize that. And you can actually, there's this environment that's created that's conducive to being yourself. And to your point, Jordan, it's all about, 365, 66 days, depending on how many days in the year there are with leap year. But I think it's really all about having this environment in this moment to really self-reflect and go, oh my gosh, like this is who I am, and I want to show my authentic self.
Absolutely. I love everything that you all discussed. And as you're discussing it, it kind of reminds me of part of our discussion yesterday when I showed you my nails, right? I said, this is the first time I've ever done this. For me, it's something that's pretty uncomfortable. But hey, Matt, come on, show yours as well. We got to show our pride. So get to
My
live
Skittles nails.
out and show who you truly are. So love all of that. So really want to dive into representing our community within the entertainment landscape. So in the last couple of years, we've seen so many advertisers, brands, productions, content creators become more inclusive of portraying the LGBTQIA plus community on screen. How do you think this has an impact on the current or future members of the community?
Yeah, so I'll speak to that one. So I think for my understanding and for my experience as well, it's truly been about visibility. And I think, you know, having the opportunity to finally see yourself on camera is one of the most powerful experiences a queer person can have. I remember, I'm still young. I'm 27, but 20 years ago, like 15 years ago, if I were to see somebody that looked like me in store or on a screen, on a commercial, on TV, I feel like I would have had a much easier opportunity talking about who I am, particularly with my parents. So, I feel like getting to be a marketer in the space and getting to showcase the community, it's such a privilege that I have, because it's funny. People ask me, like, where do you get the concept? Where do you get the ideas for all your campaigns? And I said, at the end of the day, I'm not taking a concept. It's just what's there. And I'm giving a stage and I'm giving a platform to the creators and artists that exist within our community and just putting a spotlight on them. So, I'm just incredibly grateful that all it is a big budget from PepsiCo and a camera.
Well, I think to your point, Matt, you talked about platform. Like, obviously, IMAX is a massive screen experience. And when I joined IMAX, I said, the power of movie going is the fact that it inspires, it motivates, it opens your mind up to do something different, to learn something different, to shape and mold who you are. And, I think there's people who are, seeing ourselves represented on screen, but also there's the people behind the scenes. For example, Victoria Alonso, who's executive producer of all of Marvel films, it is a part of her DNA as an out Latina who's extremely successful in entertainment to go, I want to continue to push that agenda forward by hiring diverse cast members, by hiring people who are gay, by representing that on the screen. I think that's super powerful. I also remember, when Disclosure came out, and I believe that was 2020 by Netflix, Laverne Cox, it was very interesting because you start to see the power of representation, where she said, the moment we see ourselves, and she specifically said this on an IMAX screen, it's like we've made it. And so even though these small things seem like there's such nuances, they're so powerful from a representation standpoint that they do go far, because it may touch the life of someone who lives in Kansas City who may not have access to a big city like New York or LA.
I really
Totally.
agree with
And
that.
just to,
Oh, sorry.
sorry.
No.
No.
I apologize. I was just gonna say, building off that, because I feel like I grew up in a very binary world where women were meant to be one thing, men were meant to be another thing, right? And growing up in media and growing up in, I guess, like typical beauty standards, having to be femme, having to be masc, it was really like this pressure for me to want to conform to one or another. And I always felt very uncomfortable by it, right? And so like when I feel like I started seeing more, when I started seeing more gender neutral, non-binary representation on the screen, and both in content as well, like, creators coming out as LGBTQ or queer, it was very, very eye-opening for me, like kind of seeing like, oh, I could be this too, right? I don't have to conform to this binary. And I think that's what's really important about representation on the screen, because you end up recognizing that it's very much so a construct, right? It's very much so something that has been placed on us that we are kind of enforcing on ourselves. And then once we kind of break out of that, we see that, it can be represented in different ways. That's when it really starts hitting us that we can be that person too, right? So that's why I think it's really important that you guys are, enforcing and moving this agenda forward of inclusivity in these public spaces.
Definitely.
Totally. And just to quickly, oh, sorry, Jordan, just to quickly add, I would say, one thing I've lived by, I don't know if anyone said, I know the quote is out there and there's a form of the quote, but it's not just giving yourself a seat at the table. It's if they don't give you a seat at the table, create your own table and bring others with you, because that's truly how this builds. And I know RuPaul tends to be a little controversial with our community, but I see him as kind of like the epitome of that. Is not only did he make a platform for himself, but he's now built an empire for a lot of queer artists to build brands and build empires for their own. So that's kind of how we can continue with the community.
It's like a stepping stone forward. It's not, the final construct yet, but it's definitely a step forward in the right direction.
Absolutely.
Definitely. And Matt, that's actually such a great segue. I know we have a bunch of different questions, but this kind of just triggers one of the ones that we discussed yesterday. Speaking of the way RuPaul did that and kind of led the way for us to follow that path, what challenges, personal or professional, have you encountered, whether it's in your career or just within the entertainment community, and how did you actually overcome those obstacles?
Yeah, so I mean, from my experience, at least, even within the corporate industry, with the corporate world of PepsiCo, you're forced to ask yourself on day one: do I show up as my authentic self, or do I show up to the conformed version in which I'm, what we think succeeds? And what I found is that I walked in with cropped pants, my blue blazer, I walked in like the fashion self that I had coming from, whatever. And I said to my bosses, I was like, I'm here to make a change. I wasn't in the intern class, so a lot of, they recruit from certain schools. I didn't go to those certain schools, and all I could do was show up as me, and that's proven to be super beneficial because the steps of even bringing a drag queen to PepsiCo, like we had never done that until I joined the company. All of these things didn't exist. So building that structure, bringing your company along with you, showing them that there is the numbers are behind the community. They are willing to spend. They are a consumer to reach, and they're gonna make a difference on the business. That bringing your company along with facts and figures and data, and then bringing it while also doing it fun, bringing your leaders along, even though you're like a young person. I'm a huge advocate for no matter what age you are. I was like 25 when I did it, 24. I was sitting in town halls giving presentations saying, hey, this community is one to focus on. Let's build business plans around it. And that's how I was able to create my campaigns.
Yeah, and I would say to Matt's point, it's like, I love the fact that you said, I'm going to come in as me. One of my mentors, he said it best. He said, there's only one of you. So you are unique. So like, if you bring your whole self, lean into what makes you unique, because there's no one else like you. And I think, for you, Matt, it's like, if we're able to be our authentic selves at work, there might be someone sitting in the audience or someone 2 desks down who are like, damn, I that allows me to now show up as myself. And I think it's all those small moves, step by step, that no one has to be, restricted into this box where you're like, I can do this, or I can change in one day. So I love that, Matt.
Yeah, I think building off both your points, as like a content creator myself, like as a Twitch streamer, I've definitely encountered I feel like both sides of, I guess, the impact. I've encountered the negative impact quite a bit, especially during Pride Month, because, there always will be people who target people who are associated with the queer community. And I think that's a really real thing that we still need to have a conversation about, because it's real. The effect is real. I see it in my chat all the time. But I've also seen the opposite side of the spectrum, where I've had people say in my chat, hey, I feel comfortable coming out as, trans here, because I feel comfortable saying that I'm trans because you've created a community that is comforting in that way, right? And I think that's kind of where I stand in the way of expressing myself and being non-binary on these big platforms, because I know there's people out there who are going to feel the same way as me. I know there's people out there who are going to feel like they aren't represented and feel like they aren't comfortable in certain places, especially in the gaming community where it's very male dominated. And because of that, I want to make my space, if anything, inclusive, and I want that to be known to my audience and my community.
I love that. And sticking with you, Mugi, really quickly, as you're speaking about the gaming space as well as Twitch, you kind of spoke a little bit to this, but maybe to dig a little further, what kind of impact are you hoping to make within the gaming industry to represent our community? Or what impact have you made already? Maybe there's a story or some type of example you can share. We would love to dig in for all three of you, but starting with Mugi since we're on this topic.
I actually had this one individual come out to me who said that because of the way that I was expressing the way that I talked about this on stream at one point. We typically have pretty deep conversations on my streams. Like we don't stray away from the harder to speak about topics because I feel like my community is very open to having these conversations and I've built my community in that way. But we had a conversation about gender at one point where I was saying, like I don't care. My vision of non-binary is that I don't care what people perceive me as. I don't want to fit into a binary and that's just the way I want to live my life, right? And I had someone who messaged me after stream saying like, hey, like, thank you for saying that. Cause like, this is the exact way I feel about being non-binary. And I felt very comforted and seen that you were saying this to an audience of like 100 people. Right. And I think like for that account and for that reason is the reason why I continue to be very prideful about my gender and my identity. Right. Because I'm an Asian American who grew up in a very conservative household, who eventually came out of that, wanted to learn, started to learn, and then learned more about myself in the process of doing so as well. And I want to offer that to other people.
That is so powerful. Thank you for sharing that story. Andrew or Matthew, any other insights on there as far as an impact that you'd like to create on the LGBTQIA community, either within just the field or within your respective companies?
Yeah, I would say I mean, I can relate to Muji in terms of, being Asian American. I think for me, I think I've always had the environment of having, a mom who's very supportive, but also having been raised by a single mom who's Catholic, but extremely progressive in her thinking. And I think oftentimes it's this multi-layered, I would say, multi-layered of discovering yourself. And someone, Joe Tayana from Accenture actually said this. He said, you just don't come out once, but you come out, on a daily basis in every conversation and every interaction. That happens on a day-to-day basis. So I think a lot of it is I feel very blessed to be in a community like LA where you step outside and it's normalized to be different, right? And so I think, for us to be able to show this through platforms like this, where, hey, like you can be different and you're allowed to be different, I think is super powerful. But also, I was speaking to one of my friends, he's Turkish, and he said, we walked the San Francisco Pride Parade this weekend, and he said, it's so amazing to be here because the Pride Parade here is truly about inclusivity and diversity. But he's like, what makes it sad is back in Turkey, it's very different. So like, it's not having, dozens and hundreds and thousands of people lined up on the street to support you. It's a very, very different environment. And I think if we can demonstrate that in places where it is very accepting, then we can continue to inspire and motivate others around the world to continue to push that, and that there is at some point a tipping point where that inclusivity can be felt all around.
That's great. And speaking of that and representation, and I love that you brought that quote that Joe actually said. I was actually with him last week at a conference. So really amazing that you quoted him and his inspiration. I think that's true every single day, right? You're continually coming out being your true self, depending where you are in the world. So speaking of that and looking at content across the entertainment landscape, has there been a specific piece of content or even a specific channel that you feel allows you to be seen?
Yeah, I would say, I think it's across every single platform. I think it's theatrical. I think it's streaming. I think the increase dramatically in terms of representation, it has been very, very interesting. And we didn't have that a few years ago. There has definitely been a tipping point. When Matt brought up, RuPaul's Drag Race, that is like an entire tipping point of an entire, part of the community that has never been seen. And there's an article written by Evan Weiner from GoDaddy who talks about that community of like that community really leaning into it being an art form. And so I think, across, series like, Love Victor and, Fire Island and Disclosure and all of these, I would say pieces of content that even if they may just showcase one aspect of the community, as I would say as a collective, I would say it's all compounded interest, compounded positive interest. You start to like pave these ways for people who have never seen themselves on screen or represented.
Totally. And I think that's truly the beauty of our community. It's so intersectional, and we're forced to have these conversations with people of all walks of life. It was so interesting when Black Lives Matter hit. A lot of my coworkers and straight friends, they were forced to have conversations and talk about issues that they just were never exposed to. Whereas I think us as a community, and not saying everyone in the community, but people who really have the opportunity and do it themselves. And as a cis white passing gay man, I am half Latin, but like it's important that we talk to people that don't look like us, but we're all under this umbrella of the queer LGBTQ plus community, and we can have these conversations with people that don't look like us, with people that don't identify as the similar gender as us, or a different race, ethnic backgrounds, religion, non-religion. But we're all kind of under this one hub. So I think that is the beauty of what makes this community so unique compared to others. And I'm so grateful that we have that exposure to talk about these things.
I think for me particularly, like I really wasn't ever exposed to queer media, like ever in my life up until maybe like 5 years ago. And I want to say like for me, I want to say this sounds really cliche, but like my gender awakening, I guess, but was actually from an anime from 2006 called Ouran High School Host Club. The main character in that anime she wasn't explicitly non-binary, but she had this very beautiful outlook on gender, which I thought was just so wonderful and so like liberating that I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to be. Like this is the type of person I want to be. And I think like having that kind of realization through media is like what makes it so important that like there is media out there in accessible means for people to be able to relate to, and like having like more of that be exposed to us, like RuPaul's Drag Race, like having more of that kind of media in mainstream media is so important because like like I watched this anime like fucking sorry, excuse my language, 10 years ago. And it's stuff that like is so much more common now, right? It's content that's so much more common now, and it's so much more exposed to everyone. And I think because of that, it's important that we recognize how vital it is. At least for me, it's something that quite literally changed my life, right?
Absolutely. I love that. And just to kind of speak to that, I think it's so vital and important to support not only the diverse creators, but the diverse and emerging creators, right? The ones that don't necessarily have that platform or have a pathway to get there. And that's definitely something we do here at Ben, to really work with those diverse emerging creators to really help and support and fund their productions to make sure they do have that path and that channel to be seen and heard, because without that representation, we wouldn't have RuPaul's Drag Race and some of the other great content that you're all speaking about. So I do have another question that I'd love to ask, and I know we didn't get to discuss this one yesterday, but corporate America. they rushed to support Pride, which is fantastic. But how do we thread that needle to make sure it's authentic and not overly corporatized?
Sure. I'm happy to take that one.
That's for you.
Maybe a little controversial. Yeah. Maybe a little controversial. Here's my thought on that. At the end of the day, the corporations have a lot of money, and that's what this country has been. It's society, and that's really where everyone's at the root of this greed, I guess. But what I think the community has done so well has laid out kind of a foundation of how you're going to do it, how you should do it in corporations. So I think what I love is I remember seeing a tweet, and we brought in some people from Pride Media, but they said if you're going to do a Pride campaign, you better have queer people at the forefront. You better be donating to a queer charity, and now I think you're starting to see it's not only should be queer creators in front of the camera, but you need to be behind things. And people are calling out corporations left and right. So I think this community is doing a really good job at holding corporations accountable. At the same time, I think it's also kind of a privilege that we can complain about it too, because I know if I was a kid, I would to have a Pride shirt or have kind of commercial that has the rainbow flag or media behind it. Like I didn't have any of that. So now that kids get to grow up, and it's not for us in the big cities. Us in the big cities we're exposed. And those are typically the ones complaining. Right. But it's the ones that where that lack of media or that lack of exposure, and cities across America where their parents have never met a gay person or have seen a gay person, so all they know is to just hate it. But right. if that rainbow flag, which at the end of the day, what is the rainbow flag? It's a symbol. It's a symbol of liberation. It's a symbol of resilience. It's a symbol of saying, what, I'm going to be authentic. So if a kid in somewhere America can have that flag coming from some corporation, I'm for it. That's kind of, again, I know not everyone will agree with me, but that's my opinion.
I think you're totally right. Tying back to the idea of a stepping stone, right? Sure, it might not be the actual concrete representation we need just quite yet, but it's a move forward. And as long as I think we as a community are holding these companies accountable, making sure that there are authentic representations being in the progress, being in the developments of these things, I think that's, the way that we move forward, right? And especially I think about this in the idea of minority representation in Hollywood as well. It's Crazy Rich Asians was
Right.
released a few years ago. It's not the best representation, but it's representation, right?
Right.
And it's a way forward, right? It's a way that we've started to inch our way into the entertainment industry. And now that, there's Turning Red, another very good representation of generational trauma and stuff that's being put out there. It's they're listening to us, right? They're listening to the criticisms of the audience and the way that we're inputting our feedback from our experiences. And I think if companies are willing to listen to us and willing to make that development forward, then we're already going in a good direction, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think you both said it so well, right? I think the number one thing is to really make sure you're not just moving forward and having the representation on screen, right? It's also having that representation behind screen. And that can mean so many things, right? That could just mean, plain and simple, having someone from the community give them a seat at the table, right?
Right, and the way I look at it, Jordan, is I view it as three concentric circles. Because I am on the D&I committee at IVAX. Is I would say first is yourself. So as a brand or corporate company, look at what's happening internally first. Second is how does it then affect your employees, and then third is then doing something externally, right? Whether it is supporting the Trevor Project, which is really suicidal prevention for kids who are in that phase of their life trying to discover themselves, or another organization. And I think there's also I've always been taught by my chief marketing officer that there's policy and there's programming. And I think everyone is so heavy on the programming of like t-shirts and hats, but then they don't necessarily self-reflect and go, well, what are the internal policies that we have? How are we conducting business in countries where the LGBTQIA community isn't accepted? How do we respond to that? How do you respond as, let's say, an ally when you can't bring your peer who's a part of your team to, let's say, the Middle East because you're not acceptable? What then happens at that stage, right? And I think that's like very, very deep on a different level. So I think it's really balancing policy versus programming. And before we do any external programming, which I still think it's very powerful to have the symbol of the rainbow, what are we doing internally? And I think those two merging together then ends up becoming the perfect, I would say, mix.
Very, very well said, Andrew. I know that you have to hop in just about a minute. So before you leave, I would just love for you to kind of reiterate what you said in kind of one word or one paraphrase. What is one piece of advice that you can give these folks to continue to support our community, whether that's in your corporate world, professional world, personal life? What would you tell them?
I would say there's a poem that I always refer to that I learned that I first read in college, which is "The Man in the Glass." And "The Man in the Glass," and I'll just read you the last 4 sentences of it because I think it's super powerful. Basically, they go, "You may fool the whole world down the pathway of years and get pats on the back as you pass. But your final reward will be heartache and tears if you cheated the man in the glass." And I think that's super powerful because I think as companies, as individuals, if we've cheated the person that we're looking at in the mirror at the end of the day, then we're not being our authentic selves. And the same thing with companies, and they're not themselves either. So thank you so much, guys. I know, Jordan, I have to hop off, but this has been amazing.
Wow, is all I have to say after that one. Thank you so much, Andrew.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
Wow, that was a very impactful quote. So kind of wanted to get to this next question. I know we spoke about content that we've seen growing up or where we've seen ourselves being seen when we were younger or we truly couldn't be our full authentic selves. But there's obviously content like Love Victor nowadays where we can actually see our true selves. And of course, if we saw that when we were younger, I'm sure we'd be all a lot different now. But can you recall the first time you felt authentically represented in a piece of media and what feelings that provoked? I'm going to start with you, Mugi, but is there any type of content that you've created that you truly felt was your authentic self or representation of who you are? So when someone looks at it, they can say, wow, like that's Mugi.
Yeah, I actually used to be a cosplayer prior to being a Twitch streamer, and it was really like a great opportunity for me to kind of explore like appearance wise, like do I like looking more femme? Do I like looking more masked? Do I not care? You know, like I think like it has been really a journey for me in my own regard of being a non-binary individual to kind of like navigate this plane of appearance versus how I feel, I guess. And cosplay for me has been a really, really great, I guess, experience in kind of like in a way doing, I guess, drag, like, you know, dressing up, being very outlandish, doing makeup in a way that feels like I can really express the way I feel or the way I want to look. And I think like for me, like that's really, I guess, the epitome of what kind of represents me. The just very outlandishly expressing myself in ways that like people don't usually do. And that's kind of how I like to see myself.
Amazing. Well, we'd love to, if you have anything that's publicly shared, we would love some inspiration one day. I think that'd be fantastic to inspire others. And of course, not totally okay too, but I think that's so amazing to share that and really just awesome that you're being open to sharing that with everyone. So thank you.
Yeah.
And how about yourself, Matthew? Any content or anything that you've created that you can think of that represents your true authentic self?
Yeah, so, you know, like I mentioned before, I've been so privileged to have the opportunity to put out marketing campaigns and content into the world. But I did so, I got to, again, specifically because of the pandemic. You know, when budgets were cut, we weren't working with it. We couldn't hire really any new agencies, new vendors. It was literally just like work with what you had in scope and like what we really, really can't cut. So that actually opened a huge opportunity for me. And I was, you know, sometimes at PepsiCo, I would say we're like glorified project managers. This time I actually got to like everything from concept to casting to production to hire who I wanted, etc. So when I did my first campaign, Drag for All Flavors, which was an all year long campaign that was really driven off the insight of, you know, consumers feel like we're only represented in June, I was able to pulse out different parts of myself. So the first was at Pride. So, you know, drag queens, you know, I went off the quote of RuPaul, they're kind of like the superheroes of the queer community. So we did a fun little video of them getting into uniform. Then later it was, we did Halloween, and it was, you know, showcasing the beauty of like what some people call gay Christmas. Then the holidays was around LGBTQ elders and focusing on chosen family. And so all of those were parts of me that I wanted to represent in the media that I was putting out there. You know, this most recent one that we did called Coming Home. I had, during the pandemic, I left New York City and I went down south, and I lived in Dallas, New Orleans, Atlanta, Miami. Now I'm from New Jersey, so I've only known kind of the tri-state area, and I did a little stint abroad. But, you know, I was living in these smaller cities, but I knew no one. And it was the queer community that embraced me, and it was them that brought me under their wing. And I had a family, so I wanted to show that in my piece of content of like, what's it like being at a bar by yourself when you know nobody and you're still learning who you are, but a queer person comes up to you and says, hey, I'm going to embrace the full version of you. You know, and you know, we spotlighted somebody who's non-binary who, you know, even just saying their name, I fought for that so much in our content to say, hey, I can finally use the name that I want to be represented in the world. And then this one, which this piece of content, which I'm most proud of, which we're about to show, which was called Bubbly Out at Night, was the coming back to the dance floor and coming back for New York City nightlife. So my old role was all around local marketing, and I was able to spotlight a few nightlife heroes, I call them, that really kind of saved us during the pandemic and put some bit of smile on our face. So, you know, getting to the brief was literally, hey, I want to capture that feeling when you're underneath the disco ball and you're just in pure euphoria. And that, I think, to me is where I got to say, this is my true self. This is me at my happiest. This is me at my honest, authentic self. So that's where I felt the most represented.
Sorry.
Go for it.
I want to quickly just, on that note, because the idea of being able to use like your chosen name and being able to use like the appearance and the, I guess, the identity you choose for yourself is such a big concept in the VTuber community. And I want to quickly call out to my queer peers as well, and the queer community within the VTuber community, because it in itself, it's creating a new identity, right? It's creating an identity that you're more comfortable with, identity that you can relate with more, possibly more than your actual identity outside of VTubing, right? And I think like a lot of people, they have the ability to use like voice modulators to feel more akin to what they want to sound like, or they can change their image, they can change their name, they can make an alias, you know, like there's so many things in the VTuber community that allows liberation of self-identity, and I guess like akinning your feelings to what you want to appear as in the public media. And I think that's so powerful that it's like one of the really amazing things that I have taken from VTubing that I think has been giving a lot of liberation for a lot of queer individuals in the community as well.
Absolutely. Well, what you both described is what we're about to watch. Not only does this allow people to live and be their authentic self, but kind of going back to what Matthew just said, that he was able to hand select and really make sure there was true representation across the board during this campaign. You'll see all of that right now. And on top of that, there are some individuals in there that have grown up in the California organization where Ben, we're a partner of theirs as well. So it's really awesome that we're about to see this. No one sign off yet. Everyone get ready to get chills. Let's cue it up.
Where have you been all my life? And boy, don't stop Midnight in Brooklyn, you leaned in first. I wasn't looking, but there you were. Lost in a dark room, walking on air. Don't have to see you to know you're there. Dive all the way up, dancing on me, dancing on me. Take me high. Come on! Where have you been all my life? Eh? Boy, don't stop taking me higher than I've ever been. Higher than the heavens is. No lie, your hands keep my hands high. Boy, don't stop taking me high.
Wow.
Yay! That was incredible.
Yay.
I don't know if there's anything you
Amazing.
want to say really quickly about that video, but I've watched it thousands of times. Of course, both of us are familiar with a lot of those folks in the video, but I get chills every single time I watch it.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say that is the epitome of queer excellence through and through. That, and I'm like, that was a full queer cast, a full queer production, full queer song, queer, like it was literally no one who worked on that wasn't queer. So I think that just goes to show the power of the community. And when you really give us a microphone, we'll use it. And I'm, again, so privileged to have worked with everyone in that video and behind the scenes, you know, Austin Nunes, Tim Snow from Pride Media, you know, Aquaria for humbly doing that. Again, you know, all of this was just, I've known Aquaria for years. So for her to say yes, and then Bradley and Vincent to say yes to the music, like all of those things, just, I'm really, really grateful to everyone.
It's incredible. It was really, really cool to see that, especially with such like a well-known brand as well. You know, like I've drank in that before, right? It's like, that's cool. That's really cool.
I'm switching
And yeah, and PepsiCo, yeah, like, and PepsiCo for a lot, literally saying, hey, here's a couple 100,000, like make a campaign, like that was insane to me.
Yeah, that's
still.
crazy. Incredible. Well job done.
Yeah, so kind of wrapping that up and going back to is like allowing you to have the platform to create things like that, not just putting them in front of the screen, but you were literally behind the screen. You had a seat at the table to represent your authentic self and bring that into the Pepsi organization, which is extremely, extremely powerful and a stepping stone and a big milestone for not only you and the brand.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, I know we only have a couple of minutes left, so I do want to leave it open for some Q&A. Obviously, both want to thank you as well for joining today and being open, being your authentic selves, having lots of fun and telling stories. So thank you again so much for both participating. And if anyone has questions, we can answer those.
Thanks
Thank
for
you for
having us,
having
Jordan.
us.
You were a great moderator.
Yeah, thank you so much. That was really great.
Can we see your nails? But we could kind of both.
Yes, show them off. They're so cute.
Oh.
Awesome. Well, thank you all so much again. Like I said, Pride is not just this month. It's 360 days a year. It's all the time. If I can leave anyone with last words, once again, just to reiterate, be your authentic self, get yourself a seat at the table, and represent. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Thank you
Thanks,
so much,
Jordan.
Jordan. Happy Pride, everyone.